Okay, so today Victoria Hawkins and I are going to have a conversation about shamanism, but we're going to be talking about it in a really meaningful way that I like to call practical spirituality. It's like, how do we live a life of more meaning and alignment and authenticity and connection in our daily lives, even if we live in the city or the suburbs and we're, disconnected from nature. And so really the conversation is inspired by a course that we just recently launched about using shamanic art and rituals and other techniques to bring ancient wisdom from native and tribal cultures into the modern world in a way that you can actually integrate into your life right now. It's very practical, and Victoria just does a wonderful job at capturing what for some people sounds like, esoteric or airy-fairy spiritual stuff, and she makes it so real and so easy to make it something that you can really grasp onto and use, whether you just want to change the environment that you're in, to have more peace or create sacred space, or because maybe you're going through something emotionally and you need to shift that. So regardless of your interest or why you'd be interested in this, I definitely am excited to have this conversation with Victoria so that you can learn a little bit more about it if you're not familiar with it. And so with that said, welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to talk with you, Natalie, and all that will be listening just about the practicality, yes, of what I see as shamanism and what I've come to understand as the true nature of what shamanism is. And it's kind of, to me, a word that has a lot of mystery to it. So when I first personally started learning about it, I felt like it was something that was big and a bit out there, and could that be something that I could, connect with, really? Or was that really just meant for certain special people long ago? And so for me, and I guess giving a little bit of background as to why I even would have launched into studying that, part of my personal history is Native American. We have it on both sides of my parents. And we have a good portion of our family is from the Creek Indian tribe, or Muskogee Indians, they're also called, in Georgia and Alabama. Growing up, I knew nothing about that part of my culture. It wasn't something that my family explored a whole lot, but I felt a really strong connection to it once I became an adult. And probably, I would say maybe 10 or 11 years ago now, yeah, about 11 years ago, I was going through some big transitions in my life that had brought about the opportunity for me to make some changes and really just start choosing things for myself. And I'd always been interested in spirituality, even as a youth. So I'd explored what was more my upbringing was in more of a traditional Christian environment. But I had a real deep connection to nature as well. I had the opportunity of growing up in the woods. My dad and mom had 20 acres of land outside of a small town in Florida, and we lived on the front 10 and the back 10 was all woods. So I had always really connected with the earth itself and nature and being out in nature, and it was my peace as a kid and then later as an adult. So when I was going through this big transition, I actually had a mentor that I was working with who suggested that I explore my Native American roots. And she said, I think this is really going to speak to you as you create a whole new life for yourself, to bring in this piece of you that has to do with your background, your ancestry, your heritage. So I just started reading all sorts of things, and really about North American, Native Americans at first, that you'll find in, U.S. Eventually I started exploring South America as well, because I've traveled down there a good bit, and so it became very intriguing to me. And during this time, I was also, for many years before that actually, because it's been about 20 years, I had been involved with yoga and meditation. So for me, yoga is also the shamanism, so to speak, of India. It is their native culture. It's their healing mechanisms. So when I look at shamanism around the world, I think about our indigenous tribes and what they used to use to bring themselves and the tribe that they, were into more harmony and balance. And that is really what shamanism is about if you look at some of the definitions behind it. Yes, back in the day, there would have been probably like a one main shaman for a tribe, and they might have had different names depending on, the culture, but a one main shaman for the tribe, and the people would go to that person when they were feeling that they were in need of healing of some kind, whether it be physical or emotional or mental. But the way that shamans looked at it was that there was always a spiritual connection to all of that healing. So say actually this comes out of a Lakota legend. And there is a concept that if I am feeling scattered and unfocused, that I can't maybe complete things, projects, things like that. And I might even start to feel that way physically as well, like low energy, fatigue, things of that nature, that one of the rituals that would be done and recommended by the shaman in the tribe for Lakotas would be to go and stand in a sacred waters, maybe a river or lake, whatever you have available in your area, and to call back all the parts and pieces of you whole, cleansed, and complete. So there's this spiritual idea that you're energetically bringing back all these parts and pieces of yourself. And so a lot of the healing rituals were really based in tending to the spiritual aspect of yourself so that you could start to feel healthier, to feel your confidence again. And a lot of it also had to do with connecting with nature in some way. So that's a lot of what we're going to do in the course too, connecting with nature in a lot of different ways.
Well, and actually what I love about that is that their solution was, okay, well, instead of going at whatever seeming problem you have directly, it's like, let's deal with it symbolically. It was almost like a way of distracting them from their problem and opening to
Yes.
a higher level energy of it rather than, getting stuck thinking in it. And that's something that we all do. Like when we have something going wrong, whether it's a physical ailment or, a problem with another person or at work or whatever, it's like we just keep, digging in and digging in and digging it in. So it's so interesting, thinking back, well, what did the ancients do? It's like, well, they basically say, all right, stop thinking about that. Instead, go stand in the river and invite your whole self back. And of course you're like, what the heck? But it makes so much sense, especially if you've ever done it. And that's the thing, is that both of us, I grew up, in nature too. We had many, many acres. I grew up outside in the woods, and I kind of inched my way towards living on concrete over my lifetime. At first I really resisted it, but I found that I could, through principles like the things that you're teaching in this course, that I could bring it with me, even if I was in. And I know you have a YouTube thing that you started about being a suburban shaman.
Yes.
So I think that this is like a really great way of helping ourselves remember that, there's more going on here than just our problem, that we can deal with something at an energetic or a spiritual level instead of, just kind of rehashing the same thing over and over again. And also that we can create the space we want. We can bring nature into our lives even if we live in the middle of the city. That we have a lot more choice over that than we think. And then one more thing before I forget that I wanted to point out was how interesting it is that you point out, I never thought of it this way, is that like a shaman might have been like a leader in a native tribe, but if you think about a place like India, they have gurus,
right?
That ultimately are the same thing as a shaman. So I love that you're pointing out here, it doesn't matter what culture or part of the world you're talking about. Shamanism can be a term that applies to any ancient wisdom whether it's from China or India or even European. They're not as ancient, but it doesn't mean they have that aspect of it, and that there are so many similarities. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and that made me think about too, I have chills on that, because it makes you recognize just this whole entire world and how we're so different and we're so the same. And I've always loved the Tao, which is another ancient wisdom writing they attribute it to Lao Tzu, and this is centuries ago based in China. And so Lao Tzu was somebody that people would go, and he wouldn't even talk to them most of the time, from what they say. They would just walk with him, and because he was in such a peaceful coexistence, and he had like gardens, from what they say, and people would walk with him in the gardens, and they would walk away feeling well. So there's something to it, right? I mean, there's not even talking going on there, really. It's just connecting with someone else too, who has mastered, maybe might be a good word, practiced for sure, a level of peace that you're experiencing. And then when you feel that peace from that other person, you see that it's possible. And I feel like that's somewhat what shamanism today is too, is reminding us that peace is possible, that contentment, joy, seeing our prosperity and abundance, like all of that is possible. And maybe sometimes we don't know that, or we don't remember that, or it's kind of been trained out of us in a lot of ways. So I really have loved that idea of seeing that these were people that were representing whole health and wellness. And it's a lot of the people that we talk to in this course coming up, those that are using it in their life coaching practices and things like that. They are the individuals that are also kind of holding that torch, or being the lighthouse for people just to remember how amazing they are. So I think to me, it's exciting to be able to pass on some of the tools too that come out of these ancient practices around the world. And I mean, I update some of them for today. Like one of them, I was sitting here in my little office space, and I don't know if this will be on video or just audio, but this is my kind of silly looking, it looks like a 5-year-old made it, but it's got like glitter sparkles on it, but it's what I call a surrender box, which is one of the activities that I offer. And it's very similar to what I was saying about standing in the river and asking for all your parts and pieces to come back whole and complete. You're also asking for things to be released too. And so, creating a surrender box is a ritual. It's something that you can do where you're actually writing down, maybe it is a problem, like you were saying, that we've got our mind whirling on, writing it down and then saying, I choose to surrender it. And it's amazing to me what happens when we do that, because now we don't have all of that mental energy going to making the problem worse, because I always feel like the longer I look at something, the less clear it becomes.
Yep. You get all wrapped up in it. And instead releasing it, getting yourself in a more calm and whole and complete place, now you're going to actually be able to figure out answers that might work better for you, or how to take action, or how not to, if that's the right thing. So it's funny to me, because when I made this surrender box for the video, I made a new one for myself, which I've been using lately myself. I got the most, ridiculous things you could find in like the craft store with glitter and all this kind of stuff, because I really wanted it to be something that was representative of playfulness and fun and simplicity, and maybe as a reminder too that a lot of what shamanism is about to me is coming back to how we came into the world before we allowed some of the, I call it world trainings. Some of that
and we call it limiting thinking sometimes, right? That we didn't have that when we were little kids. When I ran around the woods, no one could tell me that I could not make a fort. You know, I used palmetto fronds and vines from the tree, and we made a 3-room fort, my brother and I, and our claim to fame is it actually lasted through Hurricane Elena, which was, I don't remember how old I was, but I was like elementary school age, I think. And when Hurricane Elena came, and we had to leave our house because we had a lot of trees, and there was concern that, you know, it wouldn't be safe. And when we came back, our fort was still standing.
Oh, that's so cute.
So, you know, just using your resources, that is another piece of it, is recognizing that you have resources, and being appreciative of that. I find that bringing in those elements of nature, which is a lot about what I like to teach, is how to bring in some of the elements of nature into your actual home or even on your person, you know, and being appreciative of the fact that nature has everything that it needs. I have a lot of oak trees, but there's a big oak tree right outside my window, and acorns are a great reminder of that for me. So one of the things I keep in my house on my little sacred space tray is an acorn, because it's a reminder that that has everything in it to be an oak tree. All it needs is to be stuck in the ground and have the sun and the rain, which happens naturally too.
Actually, didn't you have a book or something about the oak tree and the acorn? That's one of my favorite
Yes.
ever.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That book is called The Teeny Tiny Seed. And it's about an acorn that falls in a redwood forest. And so she grows up not knowing who she is and kind of following, because she doesn't look like the redwoods, and following her journey as she just comes to peace with who she is. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, well, because Victoria and I, we worked together in like random different capacities for,
yes,
which has probably been like 8 years or so.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so that was probably at one of our festivals that you had a booth and you had your book, and I remember looking and I'm like, oh my God, this is my favorite. Because like for me, it's like, and that's really what you know, shamanism is really just a way of reminding ourselves of who and what we really are.
Yes.
Getting back to our roots, you know, pun intended. Yeah. And that for me, the idea, you know, the acorn, not only is it a representation of potential, but it's so mind-boggling to me that the acorn already has in it all of the coding.
Yes.
How to take soil and water and sunlight and convert it into an oak tree. Like, to me, that just blows my mind. And
me too.
It's like there's something that not only does it actually have this, like, I guess it would be like DNA, it's programming to do it.
Right.
There's also a force that pulls it forward towards becoming that oak tree. And for me, like when I first started, I think it was Wayne Dyer said it, that we have that future pull, that force too.
Mm.
When we're born, we already have within us the coding of everything that we could possibly become. It's just getting out of the way and reminding ourselves that just like the acorn can become an oak tree, that we have that potential too. And so profound.
Yeah, I really love that idea of that force that's within us. And it's something that I find that when I look back in life, I have seen that pulling me, even though I might have been making choices that to me looked totally different than what my life purpose was. Whatever, I didn't even know what that was. I wouldn't even know to call it that back then. But to watch and kind of review sometimes how things have been falling in place, or certain people have been put in your path. I mean, even just how I connected with you is through a whole series of parts and pieces that I could have never orchestrated on my own. I mean, couldn't have even come to mind to do that.
Right.
So I think that that's really powerful. And one of the things that I've learned through the study of especially the North American cultures, just because I have studied a lot of the Native American tribes so much from our USA country, was their honoring of all nature. Everything had a legend about it. There were things about parts of nature that were for messages. There were things about it that talked about character. And so nature was always their go-to. And something I came to as well through a lot of the ancient writings, and one of them being the Tao, which like we were talking about was Lao Tzu. He talks a lot about just flowing with life and looking to nature as your guide. And so many years ago now, I just started teaching people the concept of not looking at it as humans and nature, but that we are nature. And it makes total sense. We were talking briefly before we started recording about electromagnetic frequency. And I was laughing because we wouldn't, back centuries ago, they didn't have electronics or the light bulb yet or anything that you would plug in. So there was no need to have a word, a label for it called electromagnetic frequency. But in our homes, we have electronics. And so there's a certain electromagnetic frequency that has to do with electronics, which does disrupt our EMF, our field, okay? So they call it an electromagnetic field. Well, what I think is really cool is when you go outside, the ground, the earth, and the sun have matching electromagnetic fields as humans. Mm-hmm. So this is why the practice of earthing, it's something that's been talked about. I have been into yoga for 20-ish years now. So a lot of yogis talk about, going outside and grounding and earthing and walking around without shoes on. Well, it's not just like this crazy idea for hippies. It's really actually you having your electromagnetic field rebalanced because you match the earth and the sun. So you stand in sun for 5 minutes. You stand on the earth with your shoes off for 5 minutes. You already are rebalancing. So that to me is one of the really practical things that comes out of these ancient studies where they were just, this was just part of their life. They would have been prescribing it like a doctor would, hey, you need to go stand in the river, or you need to go stick your feet in the dirt, or you need to dig your hands in earth to garden. We were also talking about plants earlier, bringing plants in your house. There's certain plants, like the aloe one is the one that comes to mind first for me, that literally clean our air in our homes. So they have symbolism, but they also have actual physical benefit because you're bringing nature in. So that means that you're starting to balance your field anyways. And then that particular plant, amongst others, will change the ions in the air so you have less toxins in your home. So it's super practical.
Absolutely. And actually, what's so great about it is that, like, for me, I think it's probably because I grew up naturally doing it, that mm-hmm. for me, like, I very rarely wear, like, closed shoes. I'm always in sandals. If I'm outside, I take my shoes off. I live at the beach, so I'm constantly putting my feet in the sand. And I have an instinct to ground myself. But again, I grew up doing it. And it's like when I moved out of a natural environment, I recognized that I was missing something. And that's a way to solve that problem. But it's so interesting when you actually learn about, it's like, well, the ancients, some people who have never been exposed to it, they think about, oh, well, way back then, they didn't know anything. We know so much more now. But it's not necessarily true, because they knew a lot more about being a human than we do now, and we've lost that. And so what I love about the fact that this course came to be is it gives us back some of that understanding that for so many people we've lost. Like there's a lot of people that maybe they lived their whole life in the suburbs or the city and they've never really been in nature much. But they might have had a couple experiences where they went even to a park or to the beach and it's like, wow, this feels so different. And so by recognizing that there's ways that you can connect to that without having to live in the country is incredibly powerful. And then actually I wanted to comment on one of the things that you're talking about is like when you're looking back at your life, which is what I love about this topic is that like we have a lot of other courses, but the one that's by far the most popular is about life purpose. And like you said, like back then I didn't even have the idea to use that word, right? But what's so interesting is that in that program, we get feedback on it all the time, especially from our coaches that use it with their clients. It's just like when you look back, even at all of the unwanted things or what you felt was a bad decision or something went wrong or something bad happened, when you actually look at it like a pathway, it's like you said, like there's that pull. There was something guiding you, even through the crappy parts. Right. Only when you look in reverse can you go, you know, that actually made a lot of sense. Like I needed that to happen because I had to learn this lesson, or like even synchronistically, like had I not, you know, missed my flight, I never would have met that person. And if I hadn't met that person, then they wouldn't have told me about this book, and that book changed my life. Like whatever it is, there's always something like that. So one of the favorite phrases I have is that your path is always unfolding under your feet. And I think that's also something that the shamans or the ancients understood, that there was a higher purpose for everything. Yes. They didn't, in the modern world, we judge ourselves for making mistakes, for doing things wrong, for not being perfect, for not being like everybody else, for, you know, and we're constantly reaching for something. And it's completely natural, normal to want to expand and grow as a person. But that judgment, it didn't exist back then. They were more at peace with a human life and living a full life without having to put all of these restrictions on it and also all these requirements.
Yeah, and I think that there is an honoring of there's an honoring of the seasons of life. You'll see that as well in the way, and this is where I think the art is really interesting and unique. But again, you'll see it around the world in similar ways where they speak to nature to help individuals understand their own life cycle. So the medicine wheel, which people have heard about a medicine wheel a lot of times, they always started, so the medicine wheel is set up kind of like a compass. You can think of it that way, where there's, you know, the 4 points. Mm-hmm. But the starting point is typically east because the sun rises in the east. So it's like you're starting your life in the east. And so you can look at it like a day or you can look at it like seasons. So the east has a reference to being like new life, the spring, and also being like a baby, toddler, youth. Mm-hmm. And then obviously that would look different than let's go to all the way up to north. North is our elder years. It's also considered winter, when you would rest more in, maybe not where we live, but in most places there's some cold. Definitely in the seasons of nature, winter is seen as a dormant time where the plants are resting and gathering energy and not using as much energy. So some of those things, just those references to nature and being okay with the fact that we're in different seasons sometimes. And that can look like our actual physical age, but it can also look like creative seasons. You know, I mean, I know there's definitely been times I'm more prolific with my art. And then there's other times that I'm like, what? I haven't even made anything. And has it been a year? You know, how long has it been? So coming to a peace about that and recognizing, like you were saying, that there's reasons for everything. There's purpose for everything. A lot of times we won't see that right away. the actual, and maybe sometimes we never will know exactly what it was for. But I will say, reviewing sometimes in just a really non-judgmental way, just a curiosity way, I do often see the connections that have come out of even some of my most challenging and difficult times, or the growth, the learning, out of things that I certainly witnessed, said, woohoo, sign me up for that again.
Yeah, actually, what's awesome about this, the idea of the seasons is that it's so important for people to recognize that we have these seasons in all areas of life. And what gets us in trouble is that we expect it to be like summer all the time.
Right.
In a lot of cases, you know what I mean? So it's like, for instance, energetically, like it's okay to have periods where you're low energy.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in our society, like we're pushed to feel like we're supposed to be on all the time. Just like, it's normal to go through phases like, creativity, where if you're, people say, oh, I have creative block. Well, it's also partially because during that time where it's not flowing out, a lot of times what you're needing is you need time for it to flow in.
Yeah.
Because creativity comes from inputs. If you're not being inspired, if you don't have a muse, if you're not receiving more information, if you're not learning, if you're not exploring, then you're not getting those inputs, and you can't create new outputs without inputs. And so just like, if you're feeling low energy, rather than beating yourself up for it, it's like do things that are soothing, do things that are calming. That's what your body or your mind is wanting at this time. And then even, in relationships, is that relationships have cycles. And that's really the broader wisdom, is everything has a cycle.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of ironic that while we've been working on this course, I've been listening to the audio book of Sadhguru's new book, Inner Engineering.
Yes, I love that book.
Awesome. But it's so funny because so much of what he's teaching is exactly the same thing, just like you said. So he's from India, but he's a modern shaman. And I love the way that he shares it, just as a side note. So if anyone's really interested in it, like, it's a great, and he's talking about yoga, but it's called inner engineering. It's basically how the human being works, both, physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and then beyond. It's like, how does it actually work? And that's the thing, is that the ancients understood, whereas today we're completely clueless, unless you're someone like who's a seeker, and then we're looking back at what these teachings were to try to learn. But the truth is that there is a science of how a human is engineered and how to make the most of all aspects of ourselves and live our life as, I think, how does he put it, live a full-fledged life. Which I love that. I'm like, that sounds really good. I want a full-fledged life.
Yes.
So it was just so interesting to me to be like reading that book at the same time that we're working on this content about shamanism, and seeing the parallels, and that these tools really do help you do that. Some of it is like you said, you have to plant in your house, and it actually at a physical level makes a difference. But then it also at a energetic level, it makes a difference. At a psychological or emotional level, it makes a difference, because when you look at the plant and you put, positive vibes into this plant, then it makes you feel good when you see it. So at so many levels, just something like a simple plant can actually make a difference in your life in a real way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting, because Sadhguru, to me, again, it's like you said, just another example of a modern day shaman. And he's looking at this holistic view of people, of the human being. And that's, to me, exactly what on the other side of the world they were doing as well in these ancient cultures. And I think that there's an idea too, to me, when I read things that I feel like have this this truth and this thread that are very similar throughout, there's always a simplicity to it. It's not complicated stuff. It's like, okay, so it's winter, you would rest because that's what you do. It's not complicated. And I think that that's another thing that I really enjoy assisting people with, is looking at things, because I feel like we're taught that life is complicated, just socially, and there's all these things that you have to think about and do the right way. And I guess it's funny, one thing that just came to mind as I was starting to talk about that was the example of what we should eat, what we should eat. And that if I actually tried to follow all of the different diets that are available out there right now as ways to potentially eat, I would be eating nothing.
Yeah, eating water,
yeah.
Not even water. I mean,
nothing would be available to me.
Yeah.
So another thing that comes out of just the simplicity of living close to nature is starting to listen to your body and going, oh, well, what does my body need? And that could be like in a eating manner or a drinking, what's going to be most nourishing to my body right now. And if you take the time to do it, you'll notice that your body will be drawn to something. And when we think about like having cravings, it's not that it's bad that we have a craving. Your body's trying to tell you something. But if we just start putting stuff in or restricting things, we don't always get the message, that the body's trying to give. And in it may be that your body needs to move, or it may be that, your body needs to sleep. I think that's a huge one that thankfully is getting a lot more attention lately. I think growing up, I had like a mantra of you get enough sleep when you die, which is horrible. And sometime a number of years ago now, thankfully, I realized that, my body needs more sleep than that. And I think that we're starting to see some medical highlighting, though, of the importance of rest for our physical body. Also, rest for our mind, doing things that are enjoyable. So I think that there's a simplicity to all of this, too. It's definitely an uncomplicated way. And because to me, shamanism always brings us back to nature, all of your messages, if you are so inclined, they come just by observing the nature around you, whether you can be out in it or whether you're just setting an intention of, show me a animal that would give me a message today. You could be on your phone looking at social media and actually get a message through a meme that's there. So that it's kind of neat to me that way, that even the technology, which in some ways disturbs our physical systems, it can also be very balancing and harmonious to us when we start to look at it in a different way and balance it out. So that's one of the reasons why that you would bring certain things into your home, so that you can balance out that certain frequency so that your body can actually rest better, feel healthier, all those kind of things. And so I think it's neat that we can do that, and it's easy and not even costly. I mean, it's so, certain little things that you can add to your home, or even taking time to walk outside, even if it's just even on like a patch of grass by an asphalt parking lot, even if that's all you have. And that was kind of the inspiration for me beginning to talk in these little blurbs on YouTube about, I just call it a shaman in suburbia, because I always thought it was funny when I started to recognize that I was actually not going to go live on a mountain somewhere. I mean, I have 2 teenage boys. They're very mainstream. They go to regular public school. They play sports. I've been like a soccer team mom before, which is crazy. I never imagined when I was exploring what I considered to be a spiritual life, I guess, when I was learning a little bit more and diving into some of this stuff, I thought that I would, have kids that were walking around barefoot and all these things, right? Yeah. And it wasn't the way that my life was meant to be, clearly, because that's not where I am. I'm actually sitting in a really nice home in a great little suburb. And so I started thinking about how shamanism doesn't mean I have to go somewhere else and be immersed in nature, even though I do that sometimes too for myself because it makes me feel good and I enjoy it and I really appreciate our amazing world. So I love to travel. But I also every single day can see the sacredness right here in my neighborhood. And that everywhere has something living, actually. I mean, I've never been anywhere on this earth that doesn't have something living. It has, you know, a bird, even if it's just a pigeon, or ants, or, I mean, I could spend forever watching a raindrop going down the side of a window. So I think realizing that no matter where we can't be separate from nature. And so ultimately we can't be separate from harmony and balance. It's just that we may not feel that way. And so these tools, to me, the rituals, are ways to connect again and to get that experience so that you can realize that it's there all the time.
Right. Well, yeah, it's to remind you that you're the one in control. You can create your own external environment, even if there are limitations on it. There are things you can do. And more than anything, you can create your own internal environment. And
yes.
That's what I was, when we first started talking about the practicalness of this, is like, how do I bring harmony and peace into my life using these tools that in one way or another connect to nature? Because that's really, it doesn't matter who you are. If you connect to nature, you feel more alignment because we are we're made of the same stuff. Actually, for me, one of the tools I use that Joelle and I watch nature documentaries like obsessively.
Yeah.
And there's a few. There's one called Moving Art on Netflix. It's the most beautiful cinematography of nature that you will ever see anywhere. And we've been watching it literally daily for probably 4.5 years now. So we watch at least like 20 minutes of it every day. And I kind of forget most people have never even seen some of these things that they show in the videos. And, and that nature is so diverse and so amazing. And a lot of it they show like in slow motion. So you can like see like a flower opening and it just blows your mind. But for me, like I see it so much that I forget that other people don't. And it's just like people who live in nature and they live in more natural environments, they don't think about it.
Right.
They don't, but just like the people who live in cities, they don't think about it, but they don't recognize how much it can bring in. So just putting it out there, that even watching images of it, it makes you feel like, oh wow, this is still out there. Even if you're stuck in the middle of a city, like, the whales are still swimming in the ocean and the flowers are still blooming in the field. And just reminding yourself that they're there can bring a different energy to your life.
Yeah, and I think that reason is why some of the tools in the course have to do with doing visualizations and meditations and creating something visual for yourself, especially if you don't have the capacity to really get somewhere where you feel like it has that, that glorious nature. But to almost put yourself in that, well, you are in your mind, you're putting yourself in that, and then creating something visual that can help you be that reminder. It is really amazing to me how we can do that. Years ago, I had an office that had no windows at all, and it was depressing after like a week of being in this box. So I had found this, I use a lot of recycled things that I find. I had found sort of a window frame, or I sort of made it look like a window frame, and I painted a sky in this window frame, and I hung it in the office. And it was amazing how just adding the sky into my office, it was designed to look like a window. So it gave the illusion that we were outside. And it was a completely different feel for me, and I'm sure my clients too. Because for me, all I had to do was look at it, and I was like, oh, yeah, there's the sky. It's still there. And that's what you were saying, like the whales are still in the ocean. The dolphins are still playing and jumping. You may not be able to see that. However, we can bring those elements into our awareness more, and I think that helps to continue to remind us of that connection.
Well, and
then
it's so
open the door.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It was so powerful because the mind doesn't know the difference.
Right.
You go there in your mind, it literally, like to your brain, it's the same thing. So that's what, like in the course, it's like there'll be meditations or visualizations. And like you said, then there's also all of the art projects, which there's so many of them, where again, so you're getting yourself there mentally and emotionally, and you're creating something physical that kind of ties it to the 3D world to make it real. And then because you are in that state of, harmony and peace and alignment, and feeling good when you created this item, then the item also is there to remind you of that feeling. And so the whole thing is really just a really powerful way of learning how to take more control of our thoughts and our emotions. And people talk about stress reduction, but it's really not about stress reduction. It's about creating good feelings, creating spaces and items that bring us to a good feeling, which naturally reduces whatever it is that in our life might be stressful. So instead of going and trying to, go down the rabbit hole of fixing some problem, instead you do these sort of rituals and activities to create a feeling within yourself regardless of what's happening around you.
Yeah, and I definitely have come to that realization that it's not that there aren't still occurrences and things that are completely out of our control, actually, that occur in life. But when you are able to connect back to that innate harmony and balance, you can navigate it.
Right.
And you are able to see the learning out of it, or you're able to maybe even choose things that move you out of certain circumstances. Because of course, sometimes we can take action that changes the circumstance too, to become less stressful. So I absolutely agree. We're taking all of this, bringing it into our worlds, just these simple little elements, and a lot of it being from nature. A few years ago, I had listened to some great things and seen all of that about how the mind processes a picture or even a memory exactly the same as if we were experiencing it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's so amazing that we can take and make an image, and you have just told your mind that you're at the beach. Right. If you aren't actually at the beach. So, and I think that those are some of the things that it just become really valuable and help so many people to realize that everyone can live this type of life where you are fully walking around using, shamanism every moment of the day, simply by even observing your messages through nature. Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually what we're going to wrap this up here, but I want to point out is that the way that we present the course, we have two versions. So some people will be taking it where they're just doing this for themselves.
Right.
And other people are going to take it because they're going to want to learn how to use these sort of tools and techniques with clients. And so it could be life coaching clients, but maybe someone already has like a spiritual practice, a spiritual center. Maybe they're a healer of some sort. Maybe they're even a therapist that can bring some of this into what they do. But the point is that, earlier we were talking about that what a shaman really is someone who reminds others of what's possible, of their higher self, of the simple things that they can do to shift things in their life or to release things in their life. And so by learning these things and applying them in your own life, even if you're not, doing it for your career to be helping other people with it, you're still going to make a difference in the people around you. Because if you're centered and you're in a place of harmony and peace, and you can find ways to ground yourself even when there's craziness going on, that it's going to bleed over into your life with other people. That you're in a peaceful state and people around you are going to pick it up. And actually, I just remembered one of my favorite things, Eckhart Tolle's the one who said it, is that if you take a log that's just barely begun to burn in a fire, and you place it up next to a log that's burning fiercely, then the new log will burn faster. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the role of a shaman is. That's what the role, if you learn how to do this in your life, that's the role that you play for other people, whether you're a coach or not, is that you are that burning log, you are that light. And then the people around you that are seeking to find more peace in their life, that are wanting to explore more, and they might not know what that looks like, they'll be drawn to you. And when just being around you and the way that you think and the way that you take, ownership of your life will then, impact people around you, even if you're not trying to.
Absolutely. And I think that is really the lesson of what vibration is about, and that we are making an impact on people no matter what. So this is a more intentional way of owning your impact on the world. And all you're doing is actually nurturing yourself. So the key is like, use these things, take care of you, and you shine brighter, you more quickly make decisions, all of those kind of things, and people notice and they see the possibilities. So sometimes the greatest influences are just really seeing that there is a possibility and a potential to live life more fully. Or what did you say? Sadhguru says a full-fledged life, right?
Full-fledged life. I love that.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, and so with that said, thank you, not only for doing this interview, but for all of the work that you put into creating this program. And obviously all of that, thinking back to, years and years and years of study that you did for yourself.
Yeah.
Then you have the opportunity, obviously you've shared it before through workshops and, in your practice, but to be having this new opportunity to, pay these things forward. And that's what we want anyone who ever takes any of our programs to do, is that use it, apply it to your life, and then pay it forward so that we can keep spreading the word that, that we can bring these aspects of the higher purpose of life and meaning and alignment and harmony into our life, no matter where we live, no matter what's going on around us, that we have the ability to create that environment for ourselves and within ourselves.
Yes. And thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation.
Yes.
And I have just loved the opportunity of taking, like you said, all this that I've learned and be able to share it with people in this format so that they can watch it and rewatch it and do all those great things with it to bring it more into their life on a daily basis. So thank you. It's been a fun afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thanks, Natalie.